I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't. Then why are you doing it? Because it's important, okay? I'm gonna be completely transparent. I don't like Metroid 1. Much as I love the rest of the series, this is probably the only entry I just can't be bothered to beat. Try as I might, it just isn't an enjoyable or even tolerable experience, even in the context of the NES era, namely games published by Nintendo. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the development history or my personal experience growing up with it, as I didn't grow up with it, and to me, the game as it is more important than its history. Additionally, this video and future ones in this video series won't be looking at the game in the context of the future entries, but where they stand in the context of the previous entries. That said, I don't think this is an entirely bad game. There's definitely a good game buried in there, and I figured the best way to start this brief analysis off would be to soften y'all up by talking about the bits I actually like. So, let's get started. This game has a surprisingly good world design, both artistically and level design-wise. Many people like to note that the game basically requires you to draw a map, or use one from the internet if you're from the future like the rest of us. And, well, I guess I can see that, but I personally found the various corridors and shafts fairly easy to memorize for navigation. While there are a lot of reused textures in certain areas and similar looking rooms on occasion, the game puts in a surprising amount of effort into delivering unique geometry to explore. The first instance in which I started to run into identical corridors was Norfair, and while it sounds like a negative, I think it was actually used to great effect structurally. You'll find 4 different levels of doors, with 2 on each side. 2 are dead ends, 2 loop into one another, and 1, the second level, is a longer route that delivers you forward. The game does this to create a labyrinthine feel. It's meant to confound you, and I don't think it's done poorly. I'll admit, I was a bit frustrated when I reached the end of a corridor only to realize it just led into a loop back to where I came from on a different floor. But that's less to do with the actual map structure and more to do with the enemy placement. Honestly, I'm basing this entire map assessment on Brinstar Norfair, because Norfair is the point where I lost my patience with the game. But just going off those, I'd say the level and world design presents a few fun navigational challenges, which are only really hampered by, well, the gameplay. The last good thing before we move on to the bad is the soundtrack has some really strong melodies that includes both uplifting themes and more mysterious somber themes that encourage exploration, even through ear-grating death beeps. Well, now seems like a good time to move on to the negatives. That's a good segue, right? For some godforsaken reason, this game doesn't feature a save feature like its Famicom counterpart. Movement can feel a bit jank, especially when precision platforming is involved. Descending down shafts when exploring is hampered a bit by Samus's inability to aim down, and Samus's inability to crouch is an issue as well, but that's only with certain enemies. More importantly, enemy placement in this game is complete hogwash, not helped at all by enemies getting obscenely overpowered upon entering Norfair. Enemies in general are really buggy. Individually, most enemies do present pretty interesting and varied moveset patterns, but more often than not you'll find yourself overwhelmed by the sheer volume of them, or indeed, you'll get attacked through doorways because the game is jank as heck. I'm sure the bosses are more interesting challenges since they're single enemy encounters, but because of the placement and damage bullshit, I just couldn't be bothered to find out. Many would say this is a product of the era and that the difficulty and bullshit should be excusable, but that's nonsense, especially for a Nintendo IP. This game came out after the likes of Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. Super Mario Bros., apart from arguably the Hammer Bros., has fairly steady approach to difficulty and level design that never felt like it was trying to halt the player, and the same goes for Zelda. Difficult as the original Zelda is, the enemy design and placements are meaningful, and challenge your skills as a player rather than setting you against impossible scenarios that can cheat you out of your HP simply for walking into a room. Zelda 1 has its own problems, but ridiculous difficulty spikes isn't one of them. The key difference here is that Mario and Zelda are trying to test your abilities, while Metroid is just trying to beat you. This is a common misconception about difficulty in games, most commonly associated these days with Dark Souls. I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but there's not a whole lot to say about Metroid 1, but I gotta get it out there. People who think games like Dark Souls are good because they're hard, or that beating your head against a wall makes the experience better are fucking idiots. Look, I love Dark Souls. All of them. Bloodborne, Demon Souls. But the difficulty isn't what makes them good. Or any game good. It's the challenge and the consistency of mechanics that makes it reflect the player's skill rather than your ability to tolerate the game's bullshit. Which reminds me, there actually is one thing this game does better than The Mummy Demastered, my previous video link in the description, and that's how they have somewhat dependable grind spots for HP and ammo, usually through the use of enemy spawners. Now I could finish this game by installing a ROM hack like Metroid Mother, but I feel like that would give me a more rose-tinted view of the game, and I want this critique to stay focused on how the game was designed when it originally came out. Is it a bad game? Yeah, kinda, but it's certainly not complete trash. There's good elements in there with a lot of potential that would later be capitalized on, but of the big three Nintendo IPs of the time, this is by far the weakest. If you're playing Zero Mission and want to give it a go when it unlocks, it might be worth an attempt, but I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to buy or play it by itself. What good there is in the game is easily outweighed by the bad enemy placement, jank movement, and borderline unreasonable difficulty spikes. Fortunately, the series only gets better from here, so I hope you'll join me next time when we go more in-depth with Metroid 2 Return of Samus. Hopefully. Have a great night!